Hey, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you for joining me on this fine day where we'll be covering some of your wildest questions, such as, can you 5 DPS and still have dignity by the end of the game? Or, can you 1v6 as Genji? And, what is a team? Because at this point, I'm sure 80% of you think you're the best player on your red or blue side. Get it? Because I don't know what the team is. Right, so let's get down to the point, the beef and the potatoes, the bread and butter, the main course, the meat of today's guide. Of course, the clickbait thumbnail and the title of today's video have probably told you what you'll be observing with your eyes and hearing with your ears. Look and listen, because I will hear you if you're typing before the video ends, and Daddy Jeff will cast you down into bronze if you ask something that's already explained in the video. Of course, comments are always welcomed if you still have questions by the end of it. With that said, my rant is now over, and let's begin. Today we'll be talking about the team compositions you'll find on attack, how to make them, how they work, and what maps to use them on. Of course, this video will take absolutely ages to edit, which I am so looking forward to doing, but at least it should be a little bit helpful. Speaking of taking absolutely ages though, if I talk about absolutely everything you need to know, this video will probably be at least a half-hour long and take several weeks to make. So keep that in mind, because yes, this video will be in at least 2 parts, first being attack comps and second being the counters to those comps, mostly the defense ones. And finally, a bonus part at the end of that will explain just about every single hero's synergies with the other ones that they're compatible with, so you can basically make whatever team comp you want. Let's talk about team comps that are basically templates, and then we'll talk about what heroes fit well currently. I'll talk about the templates in general ways that can be used for reference, even if the game radically shifts, like if there are 10 more heroes added, so this video will maybe stay slightly useful in the future. So, as the game is so far, there are quite a few attacking team comps. First, we have Deathball, which came into popularity around Seasons 2 and 3. This comp was generally comprised of a speed boosting hero, 1 mobile barrier tank, a close ranged off tank, a strong burst healer, and 2 DPS, since the speed hero is usually a support. In future patches, if a tank or DPS is able to provide the much needed speed boost, the comp can still be adjusted. This team comp generally worked like this. Team stays behind the barrier tank and the speed boost moves the team forward quickly. Once the team reaches the point, the barrier tank starts dealing damage along with the off tank, while a strong burst support provides enough healing for the tanks to keep going. Of course, the DPS are basically just in there for the fun, but maneuverable DPS were kind of popular since the barrier generally wasn't very active during the fight. This team comp was best used on maps that have at least 1 capture point, and could be used with moderate success on payload maps. Basically, it was super hard to defend against, but thankfully that's pretty much changed. The best heroes to have on this comp in today's patch are Reinhardt, Roadhog, Ana, Lucio, and basically any 2 DPS you want. The next attacking team comp we have is simply called Dive. It came into popularity in around Seasons 5 and 6. Now, Dive consists of a speed boost hero, usually a support, and a strong healing per second or burst heal support, 2 mobile DPS, and 2 dive tanks. Wow, who would have guessed? Dive tanks and Dive. Anyway, the most tried and true version of Dive included using Winston and D.Va, but nowadays Wrecking Ball is also a popular choice in Dive. As for DPS, your best bet is probably Genji and Tracer, or other similar heroes like Soldier 76 and Doomfist. The support heroes always included a speed boost hero like Lucio, and a sustained burst healer like Ana to keep Winston and D.Va aligned. Alternatively, Zenyatta could be used to give a discord to the targeted healer, and giving Winston and D.Va extra survivability while they do their job. Usually the first damage dealt and the kills are by the dive tanks to the enemy healers, with the support of the DPS. The key concept was denying the healing from the enemy team for the rest of the fight by using the dive tanks to pick off 1 or more healers, and using that to give the team enough leverage to make a hard push. This was much more possible back in the day when a lot of healers didn't have much mobility and couldn't really defend themselves properly. Next we have the attacking cheese comp, known as Pirate Ship. It's basically been possible since the beginning, and even if it never came into popularity quite the same way that Dive and Deathball did, it's quite prominent still and was reinforced with the introduction of Orisa. Now, if you've played Overwatch for approximately more than an hour, you've probably already been acquainted with this monster. The comp is very hero specific, so let's talk about the heroes and the strategies that vary with the comp. Now, it's all centered around the highest DPS heroes in the game and protecting them while they ride the payload throughout the map. Usually, so far, this has just been Bastion, and maybe the second DPS is Torbjorn. It can vary depending on how you're modifying the strat. Now, the must-picks on Pirate Ship are barrier tanks, since if the main DPS dies, the entire comp usually pretty much falls apart. This usually comes in the form of Reinhardt and Orisa. Now, even if it provides free wins, the tank players shouldn't expect to gain much out of it, since the only stat you're padding is your damage block, and even that won't be as high as it should. The healers are usually Mercy and Moira, since they can provide adequate healing to sustain. Lucio can't speed boost the cart, Zenyatta is mostly useless since there are no flankers to give the advantage to, and the burst healing that Ana provides isn't really needed, as well as it could just be traded for the more useful res in case your Bastion dies. Brigitta is a close range hero that can't really get anything done since your team will usually be far away from the enemy team. It's generally regarded as one of the hardest to defend against team comps in the game, and there are a few ways to counter it, which will be covered in the next part. Next up, we have the meat and potatoes. No way, I already used that metaphor. Let's just say we have the main course of Overwatch. Now, the tried and true 2-2-2 team comp is the classic. It's what's been used for the longest amount of time that I can remember. Basically, all the comps I've shown you so far are basically 2-2-2 comps that could be modified to your liking if you want, but let's talk about the classic and what the ups and downs of this basic comp are. Now, what having 2 healers, 2 tanks, and 2 DPS does is it creates the balance that everyone on the team has a specific job to do. It's basically a matter of staying together and hitting W mouse 1, which I absolutely despise that phrase, but anyway, the heroes that usually fit well in this comp are usually Ryan and Zarya, as well as either 2 main healers or a main and an off healer, and usually just any 2 DPS you like. Now, you might be thinking, why would this team comp exist if there are similar ones with the same hero distribution but have an actual attack strategy? Well, if you want to know the disappointing answer, it usually happens when people either decide not to communicate in comms, or when someone picks a hero that's either off meta or doesn't fit into any of the comp templates. It's just the natural thing that people drift towards when they don't communicate. There isn't really much of an explanation as to why, but from my own understanding, it's probably something in psychology called groupthink, which I won't get too much into, but essentially, since everyone thinks that 2-2-2 is fine and that everyone should play 2-2-2, people gravitate towards it unless someone voices a better option, since everyone else thinks that other people on the same team have the same idea. It's weird, I know, but let's just move on to the non-2-2-2 comps. So in those variants, we have some brutal 2CP attacking comps. Let's talk about Triple Tank first, and the reason it's called Triple Tank and not something more clever I'll never know, since the unmentioned part of the obvious title is that you'll be sporting 3 supports as well usually. It's possible that you can run it with 2 supports and a DPS, in fact, I think I've used that more often, but again, trying to keep it a little bit general here. The main objective of the Triple Tank is either to outlast the enemy or just brute force them by having more health and powerful off-tanks. This team comp relies heavily on the competence of its healers, since having less than adequate healing makes the big tanks easy targets. The same thing happens if you don't protect the healers, which is why sometimes you go for the 3 healers so they can sort of help sustain each other while they help the tanks out. The tanks that are best for this comp in today's meta are Reinhardt, Roadhog, and Zarya. Reinhardt and Zarya have that natural synergy, and Roadhog is basically just hella DPS. As for your healers, you have varying ways to go about it. Always have a Lucio so your big slow tanks can make their way to the point quickly, and choose either a Moira or Mercy for the sustained healing. Your other options can include supports like Zen, who can act like another DPS in place of a tank if you decide to change things up, and other than that, Brigitta has the natural synergy with Lucio, and Ana can provide burst healing similar to the way that Deathball works. Next, we have basically the same thing, but with even more tanks. Quad Tank is the absolute monster of attack on 2CP, mainly because you just can't kill them. The comp is based on crashing into the enemy team with high HP and good damage with moderate amounts of healing. And by that, I mean that you can get away with Brig Lucio and still have a fairly solid comp. Having 4 tanks means that less often than normal, the team doesn't need as much healing as, say, having 2 DPS, because of either A, they aren't taking damage because of their shielding and protection abilities, or B, Their health pools are so large that it takes them longer for them to reach a critical health point, and they mostly just need a little bit of sustain to get through the fight. Now, we talked about some tanks and their synergies, but let's look at who really fits the best in this comp. Quad tank works best with Ryan, Zarya, D.Va, and Roadhog. And so you might be asking, well, why is D.Va, a dive tank, a better option than Winston or Wrecking Ball with the other dive tanks, when they have similar functionality? Well, I'm not saying you can't try and fit those tanks on the team somewhere, but the invaluable use of D.Va's defense matrix and other damage mitigation ability is that it can be used more freely than Winston's bubble. And D.Va also has a higher burst potential than Wrecking Ball, who's technically an off tank with just a few dive capabilities. It's kind of similar to having Reinhardt instead of Orisa. I mean, in general, Reinhardt on attack is just better, and if you want someone to burst someone down, D.Va's kind of the one you want to go with. In this team comp, as we've seen in numerous pro matches, the best support combo is basically just Lucio and Moira. Lucio basically ferries the team onto the point, while Moira has ridiculous healing potential in groups. With heroes that don't flank and generally stay in a close vicinity to one another, it's Moira's dream for getting coalescence quickly. The objective of the comp is to power towards point and put yourselves into the defending position, build up coalescence, and use it to win the fight. Of course, as the game continues to develop, I can see new supports possibly having similarly useful ults that build at a similar rate. Well, with that, those are basically all the attacking team comps that are mainstream and you'll generally find are the most common ones. That happens to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to drop a like down below as it really helps me out and helps to grow the channel. Hey there, you obviously enjoy Overwatch as you clicked on this video for whatever reason, so why not subscribe, as I love Overwatch too, and these videos are made weekly. Also, make sure to turn notifications on with a click of a bell so you can leave that first comment that you've always wanted to. This is Quarbit signing off, and as always, have a fantastic day.